And welcome, dear viewer, to Factorio, possibly the closest thing there is to digital crack. And as someone with no drug problem whatsoever, I've decided to make this video. The goal of Factorio is simple: launch a rocket and you win. But oh no, that's not our goal, that would be too simple. This is our goal. But hold on, let's not get ahead of ourselves yet. A decent base capable of beating the game in a reasonable amount of time looks something like this. Seems pretty big, right? Well, this base produces one of every science pack every second, or 60 SPM. But in this video, we'll be building a mega base producing at least 1000 SPM. Unfortunately, you have to actually play the game to build a base. And with the size of base I'm aiming for, I have quite a bit of playing ahead of me. We want to get out of this early stage of handcrafting items as soon as possible. And to make that happen, we need our first research: automation. Once that's done, I waste no time automating the basics like belts and inserters. We'll need hundreds of them to build our starter base. This little setup here is super useful to get all the early game red science research out of the way. Just put a stack of gears and copper plates in the chest and forget about it. Now that we have research going and supplies slowly building up, it's time to start designing our starter base. This stack of 48 furnaces can smelt a full yellow belt of ore into plates. And it's tileable, which is great since we'll need a lot of these. I'm tired of hand-feeding coal to my boilers, so the first electric miners of the run will go on the coal patch to feed both the boilers and our furnace stacks. The burners have served their purpose, so it's time to rip this whole thing up and make way for the new and improved electric mining drills. 30 of these will fully saturate the yellow belt with ore. And now to plug in the ore and start really playing Factorio. This is probably the easiest way to automate almost every building you need in the early game. Since pretty much everything only needs iron, circuits and gears, you can just pull straight off these two belts and make a very early mall. Giving you basically everything you would need, from belts to inserters to miners to assemblers. Scaling up production so quickly has made it so our free boilers from earlier just can't keep up, so we need to expand power. And power demand isn't the only thing that grows along with your factory, pollution does too. So we make a quick build for gun turrets and ammo before we start having problems with the biters. Next order of business is science. But with the mall eating up as much iron as it does, we'll need a second line of it, because why choose between having either research or supplies when you can have both? Red and green science are pretty simple. And since I didn't want to take any resources away from the mall, I ended up building this mess. But hey, if it works, it works. In hindsight, I don't really know what I was thinking, overbuilding the science and labs this much. This much research is enough to beat the game, and I'm building it in a base that doesn't even have a belt of steel yet? Our pollution cloud has grown quite a bit, so I make the smart decision of putting down some turrets to protect the miners. Sadly, I wasn't smart enough to put them on the correct miners. But you know what they say about the best defense. And since I'm here, I might as well tap this stone patch as well. I probably won't use it for a while, but it won't hurt to have it ready. The next thing we need is steel. And while our generic smelter blueprint won't work here, it's pretty easy to adapt it. You just have a way to fuel 2 lanes of furnaces. Having 2 of these is definitely overkill for now, but steel demand jumps quite a bit with the next science pack, so why not? Now I could keep going with this base for a bit longer, but as good as a design as this is for the early game, it's not very expandable, and the resource requirements for the next stages of science increase quite a bit. I'll let as many buildings stock up as possible while I prepare for the next step in our base. Double up the power plant, and also grab this quite big iron patch. And this is a neat little mod called Mining Patch Planner, and it does exactly what you think it does. No more manually placing every miner or using janky blueprints. Just mouse over the resources and watch the magic happen. Well, Starterbase, you've served us well. For the new base, we'll be using the industry standard main bus design. If you've somehow never heard of a main bus, it's just rows of belts running parallel to each other with at least 2 wide gaps between them, so you can run undergrounds back and forth. The first thing you need in any real base is a good green circuit production. I'll have dedicated belts feeding the circuits later, but for now we just don't have enough copper. And what's the point of all that iron if we don't use it to make red belts? Now, as much as I'd love to just keep talking, I have a video to make, so... There we go. Now we have a mall that's gonna give us every item we're gonna need for the foreseeable future. And this is what's so great about a main bus design. Any item you might need, you just pull off the belts in the middle and just bring it to wherever you need. Now the next thing we need is engines. They're used in blue science and also in trains and robots, so we're gonna want quite a bit of these. Also, can't forget to put trains and all their accessories in the mall. Well, now we've pretty much exhausted everything we can do before getting to work on blue science. Speaking of blue science, that's what I'm working towards next. And as you know, blue science needs oil. Thankfully, we have this pretty big patch relatively close to the base. And I could have used the train here, but why would I do something smart like that when I can just run a gigantic pipe all the way from here to the base? It's just good practice to set up your refineries for advanced oil processing beforehand. It's pretty much the first thing you research with blue science, so doing it like this just saves you having to rebuild them. And continuing my trend of, let's say, less than intelligent decisions, I decide to once again not use a train here, and instead run a belt from this patch over here all the way back to the base for the coal that I'm gonna need to make plastic. Speaking of plastic, and can't forget about the sulfur. And disclaimer, I am using the waterfall mod, but purely to avoid having to route water all the way across my base because I think it's just extremely ugly. I'm not gonna be using it to cheese biters or anything. Now the only thing we're missing for blue science is of course red circuits. So first let's double green circuit production so we don't end up starving the base. And then build the red circuits. Now to rebuild the science. Red and green science are pretty simple, so here you go. Military science is a bit different in that it's not actually used as much in research, but its ingredients are useful for combat, so it never hurts to actually have a lot of it. And while making the ingredients for blue science might be slightly complicated, once you have them, it's just a matter of routing them into assemblers, and there you go, you have blue science as well. And just like that, that's the first 4 science packs automated to 60 science per minute. Now with blue science, we get access to some of the best technologies in the game. But before we can start making use of that, we have some chores to take care of. We'll start turning the heavy oil into lube as soon as we can, since heavy oil isn't actually used in anything and lube is needed for robots. Also automate cracking so it doesn't back up using some simple circuit conditions on the pumps. And make a new power plant next to that gigantic coal patch from earlier, since our power just can't keep up anymore and our coal patch is running dry. Okay, so that should be enough power to last for a while, and the nice part is that this coal patch is just so massive that if I need more power I can just paste down another 1 or 2 of these and have enough fuel for them. Now finally, it's time to make some robots. Robots need 2 things we don't have currently: batteries and electric engines. The batteries just need iron and copper plates, plus some sulfuric acid. And the electric engines are just engines, plus the lube from earlier and some electronic circuits. Now that we have all that, it's time to finally make some flying robot frames. And can't forget to automate the chests and roboports. Now the first thing to do after having robots is to give them access to every item in the mall. And cover the base in roboports. From now on, anytime we need a new build, we just copy, paste, and let the robots do the work. Now the base is looking pretty good, but we have a problem. Pretty much every single ore patch close to the base has already been tapped. And we simply don't have enough resources, especially copper, to get through the next 2 science packs. And luckily, there's 2 big iron and copper mines right next to each other. But less luckily, they're pretty far away and surrounded by biters. But you know what they say, there is no problem you can't solve with enough explosives. I'm planning to go on a massive biter killing spree, so while I wait for tank shells to build up, I'll get some builds out of the way. Blue circuits are extremely expensive and slow to build, so having just a couple of assemblers building up a stockpile while there's no demand is just good practice. I also want to finally have power armor and some good equipment in it. Having personal robots and some exoskeletons is gonna make building the rest of the base much less painful. Also, it's time to finally put our light oil to use by making some rocket fuel. We're gonna need it to fuel both our tank and trains in the future. And don't ask me why I ran a belt of concrete of all things through the entire base. I have no idea. Alright, now that everything's ready, let's go have a friendly talk with the neighbors. Doesn't the map just look so much better without all those ugly biter nests? And look how many resources we now have available to mine. And since I'm already out here, might as well plan out the patches. Now of course, resources mean nothing if you have no way to get them back to the base, so it's time to start the first train network. And this is why having personal construction robots is an absolute lifesaver. Imagine having to place all of this by hand. Remember kids, always balance your ore before loading it onto a train. And there we go, all the resources we'll need for the foreseeable future just one train ride away. Now our production is about to skyrocket, but with it so will our pollution. Thankfully there's a very easy solution to that. Efficiency modules. 3 of these bad boys and every mining drill will ensure we don't have to worry about pollution spreading into uncharted territory and making our mines explode. Now that we have enough copper, let's get some real circuit production going. We're gonna need it later. And you know what else needs a stupid amount of copper? Low density structures. They're needed for science and a bunch of advanced equipment, so we're gonna need a lot of them. Now that we have every intermediate, it's finally time to finish off the sciences. Yellow science is pretty simple, since we already have its ingredients on belts. Just need to rebuild a small setup for robot frames and we're done. Now purple science is a bit more complicated. It uses weird things like rails, electric furnaces and productivity modules as ingredients, so it's not something you would just have lying around on belts. And it's the only science pack where throughput actually kinda matters. But that being said, it isn't too complicated. One rail assembler feeding directly into 2 science assemblers should do the trick. And the other items are needed in such small quantities that we only need a handful of assemblers to supply a lot of science. Now with the yellow and purple science, we finally have access to the full tech tree of the game. And with that, it's finally time to start thinking about the actual point of this run. Making our megabase. And yeah, I could easily launch a rocket right now to get the win out of the way. I think that would actually be pretty anticlimactic. No, the first rocket launch of the game has to be something special. Now it's taken about 10 hours to get to this point, and we still only have a base producing 60 SPM. Pretty far from the goal of 1000 SPM we set at the start of the run. But all of that is about to change. There's a few things you absolutely need before you can even start thinking about megabasing. A robust mall capable of producing all the thousands of items you're gonna need. Several gigawatts of power. Many resource patches. And an absolutely ridiculous amount of tier 3 speed and productivity modules. And out of all that, we currently have... yeah. So let's get to it then. The first thing on the agenda is securing power. Nuclear infrastructure is stupidly expensive, especially with our base spread as thin as it is right now. But with how long everything else is gonna take to get in order, I think we're gonna be fine regardless of how slow it is. And of course, what good is a nuclear power plant without uranium to fuel it? Uranium requires sulfuric acid to mine, but that's an easy enough problem to solve. Just add an extra train station on top, make it request sulfuric acid, and you're done. Now, tier 3 modules are expensive. Like crazy expensive. I've dedicated this entire bottom part of the base to making nothing but module ingredients. And for all that infrastructure, how many tier 3 modules are we producing? 2.5 modules a minute. Yeah. And even that's an optimistic estimate, assuming full runtime on every assembler. If we ever have a resource shortage, that's gonna be even lower. You might be thinking, if modules are so expensive, why not just build without them? Well, I think it would just be easier to show you. Here's a comparison of how many assemblers you would need to make 1000 SPM of red science without modules and with modules. And that isn't even accounting for the amount of resources you save by having tier 3 productivity modules in every step of your production chain. And given a recipe with enough steps, you can easily get more than double the amount of product you would out of the same amount of resources. So yeah, regardless of how much they suck, we're not getting away from modules. Enough doom and gloom about modules for now. There's gonna be plenty of that later in the video. We have other things to take care of. Like setting up uranium processing. We're gonna need nuclear power to even think about scaling up. And Kovarex hasn't even finished researching yet, but I might as well set up the centrifuges for it beforehand. Also, we're gonna need to clear out an absolutely massive amount of biters. And here's how we'll do that. A second suit of power armor, filled to the brim with personal lasers. At this stage of the game, armor like this is absurdly overpowered. No aiming needed, no ammo spent, just walk around and watch everything around you die. This is an early game reactor I made in an old save. It'll give us 1 gigawatt of power and has a steam buffer that'll make sure we don't waste any nuclear fuel. Pretty overkill, but until Kovarax is running non-stop, it's best to conserve what little enriched uranium we have. And here you can see our power production absolutely skyrocket as the reactors heat up. And now that power production isn't a concern anymore, I think it's time we finally got some resources. That's much better. And I haven't done any math, but I have the feeling that these won't be the last resource patches we'll need. But you know what? All that running around made me realize I'm tired of walking everywhere. So I made a Spidertron. And from now on, this cute guy is what you'll be seeing on screen for most of the time. Spidertrons have their own inventory, their own equipment grid, can walk over buildings and trains, and most importantly, can be told where to go and automatically make their way there. So now when I need to walk to my mining outpost halfway across the map, all I need to do is take my Spidertron remote, click there, and go make a coffee. Okay, it might not be the smartest, but he's trying his best, okay? Now raw resources don't do a base much good if you don't smelt them, so that's exactly what I'm doing next. Each of these furnace lanes, when fully moduled, can produce a full blue belt of plates. I'm planning on having 16 belts of both iron and copper. And here's where we run into that module problem from earlier. Getting enough modules to fill 32 belts worth of furnaces is gonna take forever. Basically what I'm saying is I need something to kill time with. And time isn't gonna be the only thing I'm killing. This is another great part about Spidertrons. The power armor you have equipped still works well inside a Spidertron. So what do you think happens when I put on the armor filled with lasers and point the Spidertron at a biter nest? And even after all that, we still don't have enough modules to turn on the furnace array. But hey, at least I can hook up the belts. Having no resources isn't gonna stop me from designing some parts of my base. Like this coal liquefaction setup here. It's probably never gonna be needed, but I was bored, so... Also, Kovarax is finally up and running fully. So it's time to automate nuclear fuel cells. The little reactor we have right now just won't cut it for the amount of power we'll eventually need. So I hop into a creative world and spend honestly too much time trying to design a tileable reactor. I try a few different versions, but I end up on something like this. It produces nearly 2 gigawatts of power, doesn't use buffer tanks so it's UPS friendly, and most importantly, can be chained together as much as you need whenever power runs low. Now to put it to use in the real game. Here seems like a good spot. I'll unload the train straight into provider chests and let the bots deliver the fuel. And since I'm not completely insane, I'm not gonna be building this thing out of just my inventory and personal robots. I'm just gonna hook up the main base's robot network and let the bots take care of it eventually. Alright, after all that waiting, the time has finally come. Both furnace stacks are fully moduled, so let's just take a moment to appreciate this. Well worth the wait, I'd say. Now that we have plates, it's time to work on some other builds. Like green circuits. And just to prove how insane fully moduled and beacon builds are, just 3 of these assemblers are enough to output a full blue belt of green circuits. Which is good, because we're gonna need a lot of them. And you know what else we need? Oil. With a patch this big, it's probably gonna be the only one we need for quite a while. But oil is no good unless you refine it first. The ratios on this build are wrong, but it looks cooler this way, so it's worth it. And as has become a custom in this run, running out of building materials and making the 2-minute trip back to the base to get more. Thank God for Spidertrons. Connecting all the pipes is an absolute nightmare, and I'm pretty sure I messed up at least twice. Again, some simple circuit conditions on the pumps to make sure we don't get backlogged on any of the fluid. Slam in all the modules and we're ready to turn it on. The most important oil product is plastic, so that's what we're building next. This build will make a full 8 blue belts of plastic when it's fully moduled. But even now, it's making a respectable 3 blue belts of plastic. And I don't know about you, but I'm tired of waiting hours for the modules to finish for just one build. So I have a plan to do something about it. And that plan starts with red circuits. This red circuit design sucks, by the way. I got the ratios all wrong, the belts are a tangled mess, and it's all in all a total disaster. If you're gonna copy any design from this run, please don't let it be this one. Now let's get some smaller builds out of the way. Namely sulfur and sulfuric acid. This sulfur is massively overbuilt, even for a mega base, but hey, I just thought it looked cooler this way. And yeah, I could have just fed the sulfur in here directly, but that would just go against the theme of this base. Anything and everything has to go on a train. And as if the red circuit build wasn't already bad enough, I forgot to balance the lanes. So now I'm ending up with 8 half belts and it just looks awful. Well, it's nothing an enormous lane balancer can't fix. I only have the module for half of this, but hey, half is better than nothing. Now finally, blue circuits. Even at this scale they're still crazy expensive and slow, but thankfully they aren't used in as massive quantities as the other 2 circuits. Also, you might have noticed the constant belt weaving I'm doing. It's just the easiest way to make items that require 3 or more ingredients while still covering them on both sides with beacons. I'm just gonna plan out a few more blocks of circuits. That's the nice part about builds like this. Once you make it once, you can just copy and paste. And now that we have all the circuits automated at megabase scale, it's time to supercharge module production. Now that's more like it. When fully beaconed, this one row will make 16 modules per minute. It feels strange to think that soon my days of waiting around for modules are gonna be over. 4 of these rows will give us a total of 32 of each tier 3 module per minute. That should be more than enough to eventually fill the whole base. This is the beauty of trains. You can get anything anywhere with just a single train stop. Can you guess what time it is? Time to paste another nuclear reactor. It really is that easy. Clearing these spider nests is starting to get tough with just personal lasers, but I've already got an idea for what the solution to this problem might be. And I forgot to hit record. So let's just say the factory gods rewarded my patience by spawning an extra green circuit block. Next thing we need is a steel smelter. The design is just a slightly modified version of my other smelter. Yeah, okay, clearing every biter nest that got close to my pollution cloud has been working so far, but these are starting to get just ridiculous. And shockingly, 16 blue belts of each plate just wasn't enough. So here's another furnace stack, bringing our total up to 32 blue belts of both copper and iron. Now that we have all the modules we'll ever need, it's time to go back and fill up all the previous builds that were sitting unmoduled. And the resource grind never ends. And now to finally do something I should have done 10 hours ago. Automating Spidertrons and their equipment. I might have led you to believe that Spidertrons are just glorified self-driving cars, but that's just part of it. You can set logistics requests on individual Spidertrons like you can on your own character, and your robots will fill their inventory with whatever is requested. They can also have their own roboports and robots to build with. So here I am requesting pretty much every item I can think to build with across 4 Spidertrons. And here's the best part, you can set Spidertrons to follow other Spidertrons. So from now on, wherever I go, I have a whole army with a total of 250 construction robots and more than triple my inventory size. And the first thing to put this new army to use for is building the smelter for the last resource we're missing. Bricks. 16 belts of bricks is definitely overkill, but hey, better to overbuild than underbuild, am I right? Do you remember earlier when I said I have a solution to our biter problem? Well, say hello to the solution. 4 Spidertrons, filled to the brim with rockets, equipped with their own personal lasers and robots to repair them out in the field. And while they can be used to clear out biters fully remotely, I think it would be a waste to not come along for their first expedition. Now back to intermediate land. Batteries, engines, an extra set of blue circuits. I'm struggling to find things to talk about at this point since it's just the same build over and over again. So as we're nearing the end of the run, I'm just gonna ramble a bit. I've played a fair bit of Factorio, but this is the first time I've ever attempted anything even close to a megabase. Probably the biggest vanilla base I've ever had so far was slightly above 60 SPM. So all of this fully beaconed building is pretty new to me. It was a fun challenge figuring out how to fit at least 8 beacons in every design, but once I had that down I quickly ran into a problem. Honestly, it just wasn't very interesting. Almost every build ended up looking the same. Beacons on both sides with just enough assemblers to consume a full belt of whatever resource the input is. Maybe some belt weaving if you have too many inputs. The interesting part came mostly from just the scale I had to build things at. Things I had never even considered before, like needing more than one stack inserter to fully empty an assembler start to bottleneck production. Figuring out ways to directly feed high throughput items instead of carrying them on belts. Designing everything to be tileable so I don't have to spend as much time just running around and building new things in the late game. Overall, if you're thinking of trying a megabase yourself, my biggest tip would be, after you've built your base and gotten a full tech tree, build another full-scale base just for the sole purpose of making modules. I could have probably made this run at least 10 to 15 hours faster if I didn't have to spend so long just waiting around. Oh, and unless you like the extra challenge, probably do turn biters off. Keeping them out of my pollution cloud ended up taking a lot more time than I expected. But anyway, that's enough of my rambling. Let's finish up this base. Well, now that we've done around 5 hours of building in like a minute, I think it's time to get to our endgame. I've chosen this area over here to put all the science production in, but I have this weird feeling that building all sciences in a small area might cause a bit of train congestion. So I'll first upgrade at least this area of the train network to 4 rails. It might not look like it, but this is all you need to make about 1000 SPM. I'm just once again going to show the power of modules and beacons. And it's much the same for all the other sciences. It is consistently surprising how few assemblers you actually need. And with everything already being designed, technically nothing is limiting us to just a 1000 SPM base. I'm just a copy and paste away from making this a 2, 3, 4 or 5000 SPM base. But for the purposes of this video, and to keep my computer from dying, we're gonna stick to 1000 SPM. Whoops, I forgot the satellite needs solar panels and accumulators. Well, I'm definitely not building them here, that would be too ugly. So... Also can't forget the pickup stations for our science. And of course the drop-off. I simply will not stand for anything in this run not coming off of a train. And last but not least, here's the labs. And yeah, I did learn how to make sushi belts just for this. Honestly, it wasn't as complicated as I expected. Well, there we have it. Everything we need to sustain 1000 SPM is now ready. So let's just take it all in. And with that, our time together is coming to an end. Thank you, dear viewer, for taking the time to watch my first ever video. Hopefully it won't be my last, but for now, see ya!